Windsor Castle, 1861. Behind the ornate doors of the royal chambers, Queen Victoria engaged in a practice so scandalous that it would have horrified her subjects and shattered the very foundations of Victorian morality. What you're about to discover challenges everything you thought you knew about Britain's most prudish monarch. This wasn't just a private indulgence, it was an obsession that consumed her for decades, hidden from the world until now. The woman who gave her name to an era of unprecedented moral strictness, who presided over a society where piano legs were covered to avoid impropriety, harbored a secret so shocking that historians have only recently begun to whisper about it. Today, we reveal the truth about Queen Victoria's most forbidden passion, a revelation that will forever change how you see the Iron Queen. Victoria Alexandrina was born on May 24, 1819, into a world that would soon bow before her authority. When she ascended to the throne at 18, she appeared to be the perfect embodiment of royal dignity. Petite, serious, and devoutly religious, she seemed destined to rule with unwavering moral certainty. But beneath this carefully constructed facade lurked desires that would make even the most liberal minds of today recoil in disbelief. Her marriage to Prince Albert in 1840 was portrayed as the ultimate romantic union, a partnership that would define Victorian ideals of love and devotion. The public saw a devoted wife and mother, a woman who epitomized domestic virtue. What they didn't know was that behind closed doors, Victoria was exploring territories of human experience that were considered utterly taboo. The first hints of her hidden nature emerged shortly after Albert's death in 1861. Overwhelmed by grief, Victoria retreated from public life. But this wasn't merely mourning, something far more complex was happening within the royal household. Her servants began to notice peculiar behaviors, strange requests, and an almost manic obsession with preserving every detail of her deceased husband's existence. Victoria's secret wasn't sexual in nature, though it was equally scandalous for its time. The Queen had developed an overwhelming fascination with death itself. Not just grief, but a morbid preoccupation that bordered on necrophilia of the emotional kind. She insisted that Albert's rooms remain exactly as he left them, with fresh clothes laid out daily, his shaving equipment prepared each morning, and his chamber pot emptied regularly as if he might return at any moment. But this was only the beginning. Victoria began collecting death masks, photographs of corpses, and detailed accounts of dying moments. She commissioned artists to paint portraits of deceased relatives in their coffins, displaying these macabre artworks throughout her private apartments. The Queen, who ruled over an empire where death was sanitized and hidden, had transformed her living spaces into shrines to mortality. Her obsession extended to her own mortality in ways that would have terrified her subjects. Victoria began planning her own death in excruciating detail, writing elaborate instructions for her funeral, designing her tomb, and even selecting the specific flowers that should adorn her coffin. She kept detailed journals describing her dreams of death, her fantasies of reuniting with Albert in the afterlife, and her growing impatience with the burden of living. The most shocking aspect of Victoria's hidden life was her relationship with her Scottish servant, John Brown. While historians have long debated whether their connection was romantic, the truth was far more disturbing. Brown became Victoria's guide into increasingly dark territories of grief and morbid fascination. He would bring her stories of Highland death rituals, tales of ghostly apparitions, and accounts of supernatural encounters with the deceased. Under Brown's influence, Victoria began participating in séances, attempting to communicate with Albert's spirit. These weren't the parlor games popular among Victorian ladies, but intense, emotionally charged sessions where the Queen would work herself into states of near hysteria. Convinced she was speaking with her dead husband, she would emerge from these encounters physically drained, emotionally shattered, and increasingly disconnected from the world of the living. The royal household lived in constant fear of discovery. Victoria's ladies-in-waiting were sworn to secrecy about the Queen's nocturnal wanderings through the castle corridors, dressed in mourning clothes, speaking to empty rooms as if Albert were present. Her children learned to navigate around their mother's obsession, never knowing whether they would find her in a state of relative normalcy or lost in conversations with the dead. What makes Victoria's story even more shocking is how successfully she concealed this darkness from the public. While privately consumed by death and decay, She maintained her public image as the embodiment of moral rectitude. She condemned the very behaviors and fascinations that privately consumed her, creating a double life that would have destroyed her reign if exposed. The psychological toll of maintaining this facade was enormous. Victoria's private writings reveal a woman tormented by her own desires, ashamed of her obsessions yet unable to resist them. She wrote extensively about feeling trapped between her public duty and her private compulsions, describing herself as living two separate existences that could never be reconciled. Her fascination with death influenced her political decisions in ways that historians are only now beginning to understand. Victoria's reluctance to appear in public, her insistence on wearing mourning clothes for the rest of her life, and her increasingly reclusive behavior weren't just grief, they were symptoms of a deeper psychological condition that bordered on necrophilia. The most tragic irony is that Victoria's death obsession ultimately robbed her of the ability to fully live. While she ruled over the greatest empire in human history, she remained emotionally trapped in a tomb of her own making, forever reaching toward a darkness that promised reunion with her beloved Albert but delivered only deeper isolation from the world of the living. When Victoria finally died in 1901, she took her secrets with her. The carefully orchestrated destruction of her private papers ensured that the full extent of her morbid obsessions would remain hidden for over a century. Only now, through painstaking research and recently discovered documents, can we glimpse the true horror of what lay beneath the crown. The woman who defined an era of moral certainty was herself the embodiment of psychological chaos, forever caught between the demands of duty and the pull of a darkness that promised escape from the burden of existence itself.